right, so I've been getting a lot of questions about from people wanting to know if a speed density tune will yield them any more power versus the traditional mass airflow tune, or the blended tune, as a lot of people like to call it, where you have the VE table being referenced as well as the mass airflow table. So a mass airflow tune versus a speed density tune are going to be a little bit different. So all of the Gen 3 and Gen 4 and Gen 5 stuff operates off of the mass airflow sensor, which is placed right after the air filter in the intake tube, and it runs off of a hot wire that measures in hertz until it reads in hertz in the HPTuners software. And it's under the airflow tab right here under mass airflow frequency, mass airflow versus frequency. And it's this linear line that goes up, and it's for fueling. Okay, these are fueling calculations. Okay, and so it reads in frequency, and it reads the actual air mass that's coming into the engine, and it reports it back to the computer, and that's what the computer uses for fueling calculations. And then of course the spark and everything is figured into that as well. Okay, well, the way the mass airflow sensor works is that it really likes and enjoys turbulent air when it's moving, like at idle, or you are cruising, or you're going up to, a wide open throttle pull. It really doesn't like, little blips of the throttle or surges or things like that. And so typically in one of these tunes, if you go under engine and you go to dynamic, right here, the high RPM disable. Basically what this means is that this one that's set to 4,000, which a lot of them are, and basically what that means is that the mass airflow sensor reads everything above 4,000 RPM, and then everything below that is technically referencing the VE table, which is under airflow, okay, general, and then primary VE. And then this is the VE table, which if you are running a speed density system, this is the only fueling table that's being referenced. When we do Gen 3 and Gen 4 tuning, we always start with the VE table, and then we go to the mass airflow table afterwards. So when we do the VE table, we essentially disable the mass airflow sensor. So we go up here to engine diagnostics, and when the fail frequency we set to 0. That way, right from the get-go, the mass airflow sensor is essentially failed. And in a speed density tune, that's what you would do. And there's a couple other things, but you would that's how you would disable it. So it only references this table. The pros to the mass airflow system is that if the mass airflow sensor does fail, which I've never really experienced, it can reference the VE table so that the vehicle will still run. That just doesn't really happen though. And so like in the Gen 5s and the Gen 4s, we typically disable in the Gen 4s, the virtual VE tables, because the Gen 4s are still airflow based, but then the Gen 5s are all torque based. And so the virtual VE tables, we essentially disable those and run only in mass airflow sensor mode only, and it runs fine. The big pro to running in MAF only mode, or using the mass airflow sensor, is that it takes a direct air mass calculation, or it takes a direct air mass reading. It's not a calculation. The VE table, like in a speed density tune, is running off of a calculation of the manifold absolute pressure sensor and a few other sensors as well. And so the only thing with that is that to get in the part throttle tuning and everything dialed in can be a little bit more tricky, because there again, you're working with a calculation, not an actual air mass reading. However, all of your, pretty much all of your aftermarket ECU stuff, whether it's Holley or Fuel Tech or whatever, they don't use mass airflow sensors. They are all speed density systems. Also, if you were to do a swap into a vehicle, a lot of people will delete the mass airflow sensor wires, or if they do it like a standalone harness, they won't use it. So you don't have a choice but to run it in speed density only. The big one for a lot of people is when you start running boost, you will actually exceed the frequency range here. If we go to airflow versus frequency, you will actually exceed this range. And so you'll actually hit a limit up here, and then the computer will start to kind of bounce back and forth between a lower number and the higher number, and it'll actually drift your wide open throttle stuff lean, which is not good. So some of the popular swaps are to go to a 4-inch intake tube with an LS3, LS9 style, LS7 style slot MAF sensor, and you can get more frequency out of it. That way you can still run a mass airflow sensor. Especially on a street vehicle, it's always recommended to run a mass airflow sensor. It's going to be better tuned, it's just going to idle better, it's going to run better, it's just going to be a better system overall. If you know, deleting the mass airflow sensor is not going to do anything for you, unless you're running boost or something like that. You know, there's a situation where you would potentially delete it, because, you know, boost and a lot more pressure is going to, it's not going to be able to read it. The hot wire and the mass airflow sensor is not going to be able to read it. Another one is there's some naturally aspirated combinations that are super rowdy that will very easily blow through the factory truck mass airflow sensor. So if at all possible, you always want to use a mass airflow sensor. You know, and I run all my Gen 3 stuff in the blended mode. There's just no reason not to, in my opinion. The Gen 4 and 5 stuff we run pretty much in MAF only mode, and there's no issues at all. And you can run the Gen 3s in MAF only mode. It's just kind of how I do it. The speed density stuff does work really well, but it takes a little bit more time to get it dialed in. But if you do like a swap, or if you're under boost or something like that, you know, a lot of people that's the route that they go. So yeah, I've been getting a lot of questions about this, and that's kind of the skinny on it. So if you got any questions, feel free to reach out and ask us about it later.